Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling something you might think is, well, stuck in the past: labor unions. But guess what? They're making a comeback, and we're going to figure out why.
You ready to dig in?
Oh, I'm ready. Hit me with it.
Okay, so get this union approval ratings. Almost back to their 1965 peak.
Really?
Seriously, nearly 70% of Americans now have a good view of unions.
Wow. That's a huge jump, isn't it?
It really is. Public perception, though, often takes a while to catch up with reality. So we're going to break down this whole trend by looking at airlines.
Okay.
It's like a mini version of the bigger labor world. You can see all the struggles and the wins of organized labor playing out there.
Perfect example. And speaking of perfect, our expert today, get this, they were a flight attendant
That's right.
and a labor historian. Talk about insider knowledge.
Yeah, it's given me a pretty unique view of how things have changed, especially in the airline industry, like how labor relations have evolved.
So let's rewind the clock all the way back to 1981.
Okay, so picture this. 11,000 air traffic controllers, they walk off the job, and they're defying President Reagan himself.
Big moment, right? Reagan, super conservative, comes down hard, fires every single one of those striking workers.
Wow.
And remember, many of those folks had actually voted for him.
Whoa, big statement.
Yeah, and a lot of people think it sent a message, a kind of scary one to unions everywhere.
Yeah. So did it? Did it actually weaken the whole labor movement?
It's tough to say for sure,
Yeah.
but it definitely gave companies, more courage to go after unions. And it kind of kicked off this decades-long drop in union members.
So fast forward a bit to the 1980s. We've got this major fight brewing flight attendant union leader versus a corporate giant, Vicky Frankovich, taking on Carl Icahn at TWA Airlines.
Oh, yeah, that one. That whole clash, total snapshot of how anti-union things were back then. Icahn, that guy was ruthless, demanded huge givebacks from those flight attendants.
Oh, yeah. Said, they weren't the main breadwinners in their family, so their wages didn't matter as much.
Oh, wow. So what happened?
Vicky, though, she fought back hard. She said, hey, all workers deserve fair treatment. It doesn't matter what gender roles are.
Right.
It was a classic David and Goliath story, And while her strike didn't work in the end, her toughness, people saw it. It inspired others.
Interesting how it busts that stereotype about unions, that it's just about money and
Yeah.
benefits. Vicky's fight, that was about respect,
Yeah.
about being treated right. And that's something everyone wants.
Absolutely. And her story actually hints at a really important part of union history, how they've been pushing for social change. Unions have always been right there at the front of the line, fighting for justice, pushing society forward.
And we see that happen again in the late 1990s. Stan Keno, flight attendant for United Airlines. He led the charge for domestic partner benefits.
Mhm.
And this is when, LGBTQ plus rights were barely on the radar, especially for big companies.
It's crazy, right? Stan didn't even have a domestic partner. He just believed in fairness. He wanted everyone to have the same rights, even if it didn't directly affect him.
It's amazing, isn't it, how those personal experiences can spark these big movements. It's like a reminder that being in this together isn't just about looking out for number one. It's about having each other's backs, even when it's tough, even when it's not popular.
And speaking of tough times, we got to talk about the AIDS crisis and the impact it had on flight attendants.
Right.
It hit that community hard. A lot of gay men worked in the airline industry, and this epidemic, it really affected them.
That must have been terrifying. For everyone involved, honestly.
Yeah.
What role did unions play back then?
They were a lifeline for so many flight attendants. They fought hard for access to health care, sick leave, protection against discrimination. Back then there was so much fear and stigma around AIDS.
Yeah. It's hard to think about what those flight attendants went through.
Hmm.
But it is inspiring how unions stepped up to help, to fight for their members.
Shows you the power of collective action, right? Not just for money, but for basic human rights, dignity, especially when times are tough. And this kind of leads us to a bigger question. How did this whole idea of fighting together, how did it change as we went into the 21st century?
Right, because so much changed in the workplace, didn't it? You've got technology shaking things up, globalization shifting power dynamics.
Yeah.
And there's this growing feeling of economic insecurity.
Exactly. And all of that made people kind of disillusioned with the whole free market thing. They saw the gap between rich and poor widening, wages stuck, worker protections disappearing, and it led to people wanting to band together again.
So the pendulum was swinging back towards unions, but what were the specific things that really pushed this movement forward?
Well, one big one was the government shutdown back in 2019. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Longest one ever. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers, no paychecks. It showed just how shaky things were for a lot of people.
Right. And that's when Sarah Nelson, the head of the flight attendants union, she called for a general strike.
Bold move. She'd been building these connections with different industries for years. And she saw that shutdown as like a symptom, a symptom of something bigger, worker power fading away.
Okay, but so for people who aren't, labor historians, what exactly is a general strike? Sounds pretty intense.
It is. It's like everyone stops working, across all kinds of industries. Everything grinds to a halt. It's a powerful move, usually a last resort when you want big systemic change.
So even though Nelson's call for a strike, it didn't fully happen, it still sent a message.
Right. Like people were fed up. They were ready to do something drastic. It was a sign of the times. People were realizing, hey, we can fight for what's right. And then, bam, the pandemic.
Right. The pandemic, everything changed.
Yeah, no kidding. It exposed all these inequalities, made them worse. Essential workers, a lot of them making low wages, not enough protection. Suddenly, they're on the front lines, risking their lives while everyone else is at home.
It was like the pandemic. It ripped off the Band-Aid. All these problems that we had were suddenly impossible to ignore.
Exactly. And because of that, we saw this surge in unionization, strikes, people demanding better pay, better conditions, better benefits. People hit their limit. They realized they couldn't just go back to the way things were.
So it wasn't just airlines. This was happening everywhere.
Everywhere. Healthcare, education, tech, you name it. Workers are saying enough is enough. And that leads us to today. Will this new energy, will it lead to real lasting change?
Big question. What do you think?
Well, before we go there, let's talk about something you hear all the time when it comes to labor market forces. It's like this magical phrase to justify bad wages or cutting benefits, as if it's some law of nature.
Powerful way to think about it. But is it true? Are we really just helpless against these invisible forces?
That's the thing. Market forces, they're not some mystical thing. They're shaped by us, by our choices, by what we value, by our politics.
So you're saying we have more control than we think. We can actually change the market.
Yeah. How much work is worth, that's not set in stone. It's something we decide as a society. And that's where unions come in. They give workers a way to challenge those assumptions, to demand fair treatment.
So it's not about just accepting the market as is. It's about actively shaping it, making it fairer. Can you give me an example of how that's happened?
Sure. Remember the Harvard University cafeteria worker strike in 2016?
Oh, yeah.
Harvard, tons of money, could easily pay those workers a living wage, but didn't.
Wow. So it wasn't about not having the money. It was about choices, how they valued certain jobs.
Exactly. And those workers, they went on strike. They demanded better pay, better benefits, and Harvard had to change. It's a perfect example of how coming together, it can challenge those old ideas about how much work is worth.
It shows that we're not just, along for the ride with these market forces.
Yeah.
We can fight back, make them work for us, make things more equal. But how do unions keep up in an economy that's changing so fast?
Yeah.
We've got robots, the gig economy, all these new types of jobs that don't fit the old models.
That's the million-dollar question, right? How do they adapt? Unions got to figure out new ways to organize people in these new jobs, make sure they have a say in their future. We're already seeing unions representing freelance writers, Uber drivers, even video game developers. It's fascinating.
So they are finding ways to change with the times.
Yeah.
But are there limits to that, to organizing in these new ways?
Oh, for sure. It's always an uphill battle. One of the biggest problems, pushback from the people who benefit from the way things are, the ones who see unions as a threat to their power and their profits. They'll do anything to make unions look bad, say they're outdated, even that they hurt the economy.
But wait a minute, we're forgetting something important, aren't we? Unions fought for a lot of the worker protections we have today. The 40-hour work week, minimum wage, safety rules.
You're absolutely right. Those things didn't just appear out of thin air. People fought hard for them, sometimes risked their lives. And as we move forward, it's crucial to remember that, to honor those who paved the way.
So let's switch gears a bit. What can we do, you and me, everyday people? How can we support the labor movement, make sure workers have a voice?
First things first, we got to change the story. We can't let people think of unions as dinosaurs. They're vital, essential.
Yeah.
They protect workers' rights. They make society more equal.
So it's about changing how we think, right?
Yeah.
Understanding that unions aren't just for factory workers or blue-collar jobs. They're for anyone who works, no matter what they do.
Absolutely. And that means learning, educating ourselves about labor history, about the problems workers face today, about how unions can fix those problems.
Knowledge is power. The more we know, the better we can fight for change. And what about actually supporting union efforts in our own communities?
Yes. If you see a union drive happening, get involved, go to rallies, donate if you can, talk to your coworkers about the good things unions can do.
It's about showing up for people who are fighting for their rights, creating a better workplace for everyone. And who knows, maybe by doing that, we can create a ripple effect, lead to bigger systemic change.
Love that idea. That's exactly what collective action is all about. Every little bit counts. It all adds up.
So what's the one thing you want listeners to take away from this deep dive into the world of unions? If they could only remember one thing, what would it be?
I want them to remember this. The fight for worker rights is not over. It's more important now than ever.
Yeah, we're not done yet. It's about realizing that the future of work, it's not set in stone. It's something we can shape together. We can make it fairer. We can make it more just. And to do that, we need solidarity. We need to stand together, and we need to believe that a better world is possible.
Absolutely.
And on that note, we'll continue this conversation in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, folks. We're going to be back to look at how unions are dealing with technology and what that means for the future of work. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of labor.
We've talked about a lot, haven't we? Reagan and those air traffic controllers, the fight for partner benefits. Seems like every decade has its own labor showdown.
Yeah, and each one builds on the last. It's this constant back and forth, the people with power, the people trying to get more of it.
Which brings us to the big question, right? What's next for unions? Can they actually make it in a world that's changing so fast? I mean, technology is disrupting everything. The way we work is totally different.
It's complicated for sure. But one thing's for sure, unions have got to adapt or they'll be left behind. They can't just keep doing things the old way.
So what does that look like? How do unions stay relevant when you've got robots doing jobs, the gig economy, people working from home?
They got to get creative, figure out how to organize workers in these new setups. We're already seeing it. Unions for freelance writers, Uber drivers, even video game makers. They're realizing that the old rules of work, they don't apply anymore.
So technology, which a lot of people see as this threat to jobs, it could actually help unions.
Oh, yeah, big time. They're using social media, all these online platforms, even data to connect with workers, run campaigns, push for policy changes. They're using all the digital tools to their advantage.
It's like meeting workers where they are, right online. But even with all these new tools, unions still have a tough road ahead.
Definitely. You always have people fighting back the ones who like things the way they are. They'll try to make unions look bad, say they're outdated, that they hurt the economy. There are laws, politics, powerful people all working against them.
But hasn't it always been like that? Unions have always had people against them. It's like part of their story.
Totally. Fighting for worker rights has never been easy. It's always a struggle against those who have power and don't want to share it. But it's a fight that needs to happen. And we can't forget, unions fought hard for a lot of the good things we have now, like the 40-hour work week, minimum wage, safety rules at work.
Right. We take those things for granted sometimes. Forget how hard people fought to get them.
And now, as we try to figure out this new economy, we got to remember those who came before us, learn from them.
So, okay, what about us? You and me, everyday people. What can we do to support this movement? Help workers have a voice?
Well, we got to change how people think about unions. Stop thinking of them as like something from the past. They're important. They protect workers. They make things fairer for everyone.
It's about like changing our minds.
Right.
Realizing that unions aren't just for factory workers or whatever. They're for anyone who works. Doesn't matter what you do.
Exactly. And that means we got to educate ourselves, learn about labor history, the problems workers face, and how unions can help.
So the more we know, the more we can do.
Right. And don't underestimate the power of just showing up. If you see a union trying to get started somewhere, go to their rallies, support them, or just talk to your coworkers about how good unions can be.
It's about showing up for people fighting for their rights, and it makes things better for everyone. And maybe, just maybe, by doing that, we can start something bigger, real change.
Love that. It's about each person doing their part, and it all adds up.
And it helps everyone, not just the people in the unions, right?
Absolutely. When workers have more power, they can get better pay, benefits, working conditions. Everyone wins.
So stronger unions, stronger economy, a more fair society, it all connects.
Exactly. And it goes back to what we were saying about market forces. They're not like set in stone. We make choices, and those choices shape those forces. We can push them towards fairness.
So it's about taking control, not just letting things happen.
Exactly.
This has been really eye-opening. We've covered so much from the history of unions to how they're changing now. But the biggest thing is this movement, it's about all of us.
It really is. It's about everyday people fighting for a better life.
So what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember from this deep dive into the world of labor?
That you have power. Doesn't matter what you do for a living, you can make a difference.
Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, as we wrap up our look at labor unions, I keep thinking about how those historical fights, those changing strategies, it all comes down to real people, right? Regular workers.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, right? Not just ideas or history, real people fighting for a better life. Like those strikes we've seen lately, John Deere, Kellogg's, UPS. Those were tough fights, but they got real results. Better pay, safer jobs, more respect.
Those wins are amazing, but do they change anything bigger? I mean, beyond those specific companies, those industries?
Totally. Each win sends a message. It gives workers in other industries, courage to ask for more. It proves that fighting together can work.
Yeah.
And that can change everything, wages, even laws.
So it's not just about those on strike. It's about creating change for everyone.
Exactly. Winning makes more wins. When workers see others getting results, it creates momentum. It makes them believe change is possible.
It's about changing the whole story, isn't it? Moving away from this idea that workers are powerless against these huge companies. It's
Yep.
about believing you have a voice and using it to make things fairer.
Exactly. Taking control, knowing your worth, demanding a seat at the table.
Right.
And it goes beyond just pay and benefits. It's about dignity, respect, having a say in things that affect you directly.
Yeah, being valued for the work you do. I
Yeah.
think everyone wants that, to be treated fairly, to have some control over their lives.
It's a basic human thing. And that's why I think all this new energy around labor, it can make society better for everyone, not just union members. When workers have power, they can bargain. That means better pay, better benefits, better conditions, and that helps everyone, the economy, reduces inequality, it makes our democracy stronger.
So it's a win-win. Stronger workers, stronger everything.
Absolutely. Workers doing well means the economy does well. When people feel good about their jobs, they do better work, they're more involved in their communities.
Like a ripple effect, right? One good thing leads to another and another until eventually you have a fairer world for everyone.
That's it, exactly. And it takes us back to what we talked about before, market forces. They're not some unchangeable law. They're shaped by what we do, by our values, by our actions together. We have the power to change them, to steer them towards justice and fairness.
So as we finish up this deep dive into the world of unions, what's the one thing you want listeners to take away from all of this?
This. You have power. Doesn't matter what you do, you can make a difference.
Wow. That's powerful.
Yes.
It's like a reminder that we're not just along for the ride. We can change things.
You got it.
We can shape the future of work.
Absolutely.
And one of the best ways to do that is by acting together. Join a union, support a strike, even just talking to your coworkers about what's bothering you. It all matters. Every little bit helps create a better, fairer workplace.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This deep dive, it's been really amazing learning about how unions started, how they're changing now, but most importantly, how all of this affects every single one of us.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I hope it makes people want to learn more, get involved in the labor movement in their own communities.
For sure. So until our next deep dive, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep fighting for a better world. Thanks for listening, everyone.